The church bells rang across the small southern town, their cheerful sound cruel against the storm inside Amara Johnson's chest. She stood at the altar in her lace gown, 6'6" with broad shoulders shaped by years of work on her family's farm. Her veil floated softly, but her eyes stayed fixed on the man she loved, the man who had promised her forever. Malcolm's hands shook as he faced her, his lips pressed tight, his eyes darting toward the congregation. The pews buzzed with whispers and muffled laughter, cell phones already raised to record. The people hadn't come to witness love. They had come to watch a spectacle. "She looks like a linebacker," a woman muttered without lowering her voice. "Who could kiss someone like that?" another whispered. The words cut into Amara like knives. Her heart pounded with hope that Malcolm would still reach for her hand, that he would silence their cruelty and prove his love. But instead his voice broke the moment apart. "I can't do this." Gasps rippled across the church. Laughter spilled from the back rows. Cameras clicked and screens lit up as Malcolm dropped the bouquet and ran down the aisle, the church doors bursting open as sunlight flooded in behind him. For a moment, Amara stood frozen, her tall frame rigid with disbelief, but the whispers rose sharper and crueler. No wonder he left. She'd crush him. She looks like a man. Every word dug deeper into her heart. The veil on her head felt like a shroud, the dress like a costume made for mockery. She ripped the veil away, clenched it in her fist, and lifted her chin, higher than anyone else in the room. Her footsteps thundered as she marched down the aisle, not toward happiness but into humiliation. She pushed open the heavy doors and sunlight hit her face as the crowd outside erupted in laughter. Phones snapped pictures and a video uploaded before she reached the steps. By the time she made it to the parking lot, hashtags were already spreading. A giant bride toss, runaway groom. Online comments poured in. She should be in the NFL. Imagine waking up to that every morning. Poor man. She would break him in half. Each line pressed heavier on her chest. She shoved herself into her car, the fabric of her gown tearing as she forced her frame into the seat. She slammed the door, gripped the steering wheel, and finally let her tears fall. That night, her humiliation spread across the internet. By morning, millions across America knew her face. Not as Amara Johnson, not as a woman in love, but as the giant bride who had been abandoned at the altar. Amara didn't drive back to her small apartment in town. Instead, she turned onto the winding back roads that led to the place she had avoided for years, the old Johnson family farm. The wooden gate stood weathered at the end of the gravel lane, the house behind it sagging with age, shutters broken and weeds climbing across the porch. It was the land her parents had left her when they passed, a land she had loved but couldn't bear to live on after grief took them both. Now, stripped of her dignity and her reputation, she had nowhere else to go. The farmhouse smelled of dust and old wood as she stepped inside, her footsteps echoing in the silence where her father's laughter and her mother's gentle humming once lived. She dropped the torn veil on the kitchen counter, leaned against the sink, and let her trembling body sag with exhaustion. By morning, her phone lit up with hundreds of messages, half from people she knew, half from strangers. Some pretended to offer sympathy. Others dripped with curiosity, but most were cruel. Headlines screamed across every platform. Runaway groom leaves giant bride at the altar. Talk shows replayed the clip. Comedians imitated her walk. Meme pages filled with her face alongside monsters from movies. Her humiliation had gone national, and she had no control over it. She deleted the apps, flipped the phone face down, and stared at the peeling wallpaper. For days she wandered the farm like a ghost, brushing dust off tractors, repairing fences, staring out at fields now overtaken by weeds. Every corner held a memory of sweat and family, of summers under a blazing sun and winters by firelight. She had once loved this land fiercely, but now it reminded her only of what had made her different: her strong arms, broad shoulders, her size and endurance. All of it had been necessary to keep her family alive, but out in the world those same traits made her a spectacle. The neighbors noticed her return. They drove slowly past the gate, their eyes lingering, their whispers floating back into town. Children laughed when they rode their bikes past her property. Adults shook their heads with pity or scorn. At the grocery store, an old man muttered loudly that no man would ever marry her, that she'd die alone. Amara pretended not to hear, but each word sank like a stone in her chest. At night she lay in her childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling beams that stretched like skeletal fingers across the roof. The wind rattled the loose shutters while loneliness pressed down heavier than the ridicule. Beneath her anger and shame was an ache she couldn't ignore. She longed for connection, for a touch that wasn't mocking, for a voice that didn't carry pity. She remembered how it had felt during those brief months with Malcolm, when she thought she had found someone who looked past her height and strength. That hope seemed foolish now, a cruel trick. One evening, as the sun bled across the horizon in deep red streaks, Amara stood in the barn doorway and whispered words she had never dared to say aloud. "If no man wants me, then I'll find someone who has no choice." Her own voice startled her. It sounded desperate but powerful, a vow born of pain and defiance. She had spent her life letting others decide her worth. Perhaps now she would seize it, even if the world thought her monstrous. The vow echoed inside her as days turned to weeks. She cleaned the farmhouse slowly, scrubbing floors, fixing broken boards, repairing curtains. She worked her hands raw, repairing fences in the pasture. Her towering figure drew stares from cars on the road, neighbors whispering that she was wasting her time rebuilding a prison for herself. They didn't know she wasn't building a prison, she was building a fortress. Yet even as the work filled her days, the silence devoured her nights. She ate dinner alone at the long wooden table, hearing only her own chewing where once her parents' laughter had filled the room. She watched couples in town walking hand in hand, their small gestures of intimacy slicing her like knives. She avoided mirrors, unwilling to face the reflection the world mocked. Her only companions were the crows circling the fields, and a stray cat that wandered into the barn now and then. One afternoon she drove into town for supplies. The whispers followed her down every aisle. Two teenagers filmed her from behind a stack of cereal boxes, snickering. That's her, the giant bride. Rage coiled in her stomach, but she pretended not to notice. At the checkout, the cashier's eyes widened as if expecting her to crush the counter with her bare hands. When Amara returned to the farm, she slammed the truck door and let out a guttural cry that echoed across the empty land. Bitter tears stung her cheeks, but beneath them something harder began to burn. Defiance. She was tired of being a joke. She was tired of letting other people control her story. If the world insisted on calling her a giant, then she would live like one. She whispered her vow again that night, her voice stronger now. "If no man wants me, then I'll find someone who has no choice." The words no longer sounded like despair. They sounded like a promise. A promise that one day someone would see her not as a meme or a spectacle, but as a woman worthy of love. Life on the farm settled into a rhythm. Amara woke at dawn, repaired fences, cleared overgrown fields, and mended the farmhouse piece by piece. Her hands blistered, her back ached, but the labor grounded her in a way nothing else did. In the sweat and exhaustion, she sometimes found fleeting peace, the kind her father once spoke about when he said honest work could heal a broken spirit. But nights were cruel. Headlines still circled online, new memes appearing every week. People edited her towering frame into jokes, pasted her face into comic scenes, mocked her as if she were a monster in a film. Sometimes she wanted to smash her phone into pieces, but part of her couldn't look away. She read the comments, punishing herself with every word. Amid the cruelty, there were rare sparks of kindness. A woman wrote, "She's beautiful, strong. Men are cowards." Another added, "I wish I had her courage to stand tall." These voices were drowned out by mockery, but they were there, small lights in the dark. Amara clung to them even if she couldn't believe them yet. Each night she whispered her vow again. "If no man wants me, then I'll find someone who has no choice." It no longer felt like madness. It felt like a seed of power, a promise she could cling to. One evening the sky turned heavy and dark while she was out repairing fence posts. Her hands blistered from the hammer, her arms sore from carrying wood. Black clouds gathered low. The wind bent the tall grass flat, and the air smelled sharp with rain. Just as she dragged her tools toward the barn, she heard the low growl of an engine struggling along the muddy road. Through the sheets of rain, she saw a sleek black SUV stuck half buried in the muck, its tires spinning uselessly. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out, cursing under his breath as the storm plastered his clothes to his body. He was tall by ordinary standards, but when Amara approached, his eyes widened in shock as if confronted by something out of legend. Rain poured down her face, her work shirt clung to her frame, and mud swallowed her boots as she stepped closer. She didn't say anything at first. She just studied him, his polished leather shoes ruined in the mud, his expensive watch flashing beneath the storm, the way he looked like he belonged in a boardroom, not on a country road. "You won't get it out like that," she called over the roar of the wind. He turned toward her, startled. "I didn't see anyone around. Can you help?" His voice carried both frustration and embarrassment. Amara waded into the mud, motioned him aside, and pressed her hands against the back of the SUV. With one deep breath, she pushed. Her boots dug into the ground, her muscles coiled, and the massive vehicle lurched free as if it weighed nothing. The man stared in disbelief, rain dripping into his eyes. Amara stepped back, breath steady despite the effort. She wiped the rain from her brow. "Next time, don't drive a city car onto farm roads." He laughed, part disbelieving, part admiring. "You just did what 3 men in a tow truck couldn't." She shrugged as if it meant nothing. "I've been doing this all my life." For a moment they stood in the storm, rain pounding around them, silence charged between them. He extended his hand, rain slick between them. "I'm Darius." She hesitated, then took it. "Amara." He didn't flinch at her grip, though it swallowed his hand. Instead, he studied her face with an intensity that unsettled her. She pulled her hand back quickly, uncomfortable under his gaze. "You should get moving before the road washes out," she said. He nodded, but instead of leaving, he asked, "Do you live nearby? Maybe I can repay you for the help." Amara gave a short, bitter laugh. "You don't want to be seen with me." His brow furrowed. "Why would you say that?" She turned from him, the rain hiding the heat in her eyes. "You'll find out soon enough." Without another word, she strode back toward her barn, her figure swallowed by the storm. Darius watched her go, something stirring inside him that he couldn't explain. He had met countless women, glamorous faces from polished high society, but none had struck him like this towering woman who pushed his car free with her bare hands. He drove away, but his thoughts stayed behind. Amara returned to her farmhouse, soaked and shivering, furious with herself for even speaking. She wanted to remain hidden, to disappear from the world that mocked her. But now a stranger had seen her strength, and worse, he hadn't recoiled. He had looked at her as though she wasn't a joke, not a meme, but someone worth seeing. She told herself it meant nothing, that he was just passing through, and she would never see him again. Yet as she peeled off her wet clothes and listened to the storm batter the windows, she couldn't banish the image of his eyes, steady, searching, unafraid. She whispered into the empty house, almost in anger. "Don't hope, don't be fooled again." But a spark had been lit, and no storm could put it out. The storm had passed, but Darius returned the very next day. Amara was in the barn repairing a broken stall when she heard the crunch of tires on the gravel drive. Her stomach clenched, praying it was a delivery truck. But when she stepped into the light, she saw the same sleek SUV and the same man climbing out, this time dressed in plain jeans and a jacket. Even dressed down, his posture carried polish and authority. He smiled as if the storm had been an introduction, and this was a continuation. She frowned, gripping the hammer tightly. "You shouldn't be here." "I thought I owed you thanks," he replied. "Maybe coffee. Maybe just a proper conversation without rain." "You don't understand," she said, her voice sharp. "People talk, they'll see your car at my farm and make assumptions." His smile faded slightly. "What assumptions?" Her laugh was bitter. "You really don't know who I am, do you?" She dropped the hammer onto the workbench with a clang. I'm the joke the whole country's laughing at, the giant bride, the woman left at the altar. Recognition flickered across his face. He had seen the viral clip just like everyone else. He remembered the headlines, the late-night jokes, the endless memes. Standing here in front of him, the woman from that video was no longer an image on a screen but flesh and blood. That was you, he murmured. Yes, she snapped. That was me. So go. Leave before someone photographs you here and turns you into another punchline. But instead of retreating, he stepped closer. I don't care what people say. Her eyes narrowed. You should. Your life will be ruined if they think you're with me. He shook his head firmly. You saved me yesterday. I want to know you. Not the meme, not the headlines, but you. Her chest tightened. No one had spoken to her like that since Malcolm, and even he had crumbled when the world mocked too loudly. Fear twisted her words. You want to know me? Fine. Then know this. I'm tired of men who play games, tired of being left when it matters. If you step into my life, you won't leave. Her voice trembled as she added the vow that had haunted her since the night she whispered it in the barn. You're going to have sex with me. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Darius blinked, stunned. He had expected anger, rejection, maybe even tears, but not this. Her words were raw, desperate, forged from years of loneliness and humiliation. She stood tall and defiant, daring him to laugh. But he didn't. He looked at her carefully, searching her face, seeing the pain beneath her sharp words. Slowly he said, That's not why I came here. She barked out a harsh laugh. Of course, not. No one ever comes for me. They come to laugh, to use me, to leave, but I won't let that happen again. If you want to stand here looking at me like I'm worth something, then prove it. Stay. His pulse pounded, but he didn't move away. He could have walked back to his SUV and disappeared, but something anchored him here. The memory of her, strength, the fire in her eyes, the dignity with which she had walked away in the storm. He stepped closer until only a breath separated them. I'm not here to mock you, I'm not here to run. She shook her head, disbelief in her eyes. They all say that. Then they leave when the laughter gets too loud. His voice hardened. I'm not them. For a long moment they stood in the barn, rain dripping from the eaves, dust swirling in the light. Her hammer lay forgotten. She crossed her arms over her chest, every muscle tense. Finally she asked quietly, Why are you here then? His answer surprised even him. Because I want to understand you. She looked away, unable to meet his gaze. You won't like what you find. He smiled faintly. Then let me decide. That. Her breath shook. You shouldn't get involved with me. My name is poison. My face is a joke. Every time I step outside, people whisper. He lifted his chin. Then let them whisper. Her throat tightened. She turned away, but he reached out, resting his hand gently on her arm. She flinched, not from pain, but from the shock of a touch that wasn't mocking or cruel. He pulled back quickly. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... She shook her head. No. It's just been so long since anyone touched me without disgust. Her voice cracked and tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them away. Darius's gaze softened. Amara, you are not what they say. You are strong, and you are remarkable. If they can't see that, it's their blindness, not yours. She gave a bitter laugh. Words. They're always just words. Malcolm had words too, until he ran from me in front of everyone. Anger stirred in Darius at the name of the man who had abandoned her, but he stayed focused on her. I'm not Malcolm. She searched his eyes, looking for pity, for mockery, but found none. Only sincerity. Why? She whispered. Why are you really here? He hesitated. He couldn't reveal the truth, not yet. Not that he was Darius Cole, billionaire investor whose face graced magazines and whose money turned industries. If she knew, she might think he was playing a cruel game. So instead he said, Because you helped me when you didn't have to. Because when I looked at you, I didn't see a joke. I saw someone I couldn't ignore. Her heart pounded painfully. She wanted to believe him, but belief had betrayed her before. She whispered, "If you stay, you'll regret it." His voice was steady. "Then let me regret it." For the first time, she had no reply. Silence stretched between them, fragile and uncertain, but no longer filled with anger. She turned back to her work, lifting the hammer with shaking hands. He didn't leave. He leaned against the stall, watching her work, not with mockery but with quiet respect. And though she kept her eyes on the wood, she felt his gaze warm against her skin. For the first time since the church bells had condemned her, Amara felt something inside her stir that wasn't shame or anger. It was dangerous, small, and fragile, but it was real. Hope. Darius kept coming back to the farm. At first he brought excuses, a box of nails when he saw her repairing fences, a bag of seed she hadn't asked for, even small tools that she already owned. Amara bristled at his persistence, suspicious of his motives, but each time she let him stay a little longer. Days blurred into weeks, and though she told herself not to trust him, his presence carved a hollow in her loneliness. He watched her work with a kind of attention she had never known. When she lifted heavy beams or carried hay bales, he didn't joke or recoil. He simply admired her strength. Sometimes he joined in, though his soft hands revealed a man who wasn't used to labor. She noticed, and curiosity began to stir. One evening they sat on the porch as the sun dipped behind golden fields. Amara finally asked, "Who are you really?" Darius sipped the water she'd given him, eyes on the horizon. "Just someone who needed a place away from the noise." The answer was too simple. She studied the cut of his clothes, the way he spoke, the calm power in his manner. "You don't belong here," she said quietly. He turned to her, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Neither do you, according to them." Her chest tightened because it was true. In town she was still the giant bride, the joke on every lip, the subject of cruel stares. Every trip to the store reminded her of the gulf between herself and the rest of the world. His words cut through her defenses, binding them with a thread of shared exile. But the truth about him was heavier than he admitted. Darius Cole wasn't just a stranger looking for peace. He was a billionaire investor whose decisions shaped entire industries. He had left the world of glass towers and boardrooms because the air there had grown too toxic. Betrayal had scarred him. A woman he once loved, dazzling and beautiful, had abandoned him for another man when she realized his wealth came with expectations. Since then, Darius had been chased by faces that only saw his bank account, not his heart. He had come to the countryside searching for something real. Amara didn't know this yet. To her, he was just Darius, a man who looked at her without flinching. One afternoon, as they worked side by side repairing a collapsed fence, she asked again, "You're not like the men around here. What are you hiding?" He chuckled softly. "Maybe I'm hiding that I'm tired. Tired of being used. Tired of being watched. Maybe I came here to find someone who doesn't care about money." She stiffened. "Money is the only thing people care about. I was left because of how I look. You were used because of what you have. Either way, neither of us is enough." His smile faded, and silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of hammering. Later that week, she finally let him step inside the farmhouse. The worn furniture, the peeling wallpaper, and the crooked photos of her parents still hung on the walls. As he touched the frame of one family portrait, his face softened, and she thought she saw loneliness in him that mirrored her own. But the town noticed. Neighbors saw his SUV at her farm more than once. Pictures appeared online, blurry but unmistakable. The giant bride wasn't alone anymore. Captions spread quickly. "She found a lover." Memes returned with sharper cruelty. They drew cartoons of her cradling a tiny man in her palm, of wedding cakes collapsing under her weight. Amara thought she had grown numb, but the new ridicule cut deeper because now it dragged Darius into the storm. His face appeared beside hers in gossip blogs, mystery man seen with giant bride. Who is he? Speculation spread. Some claimed he was a fetishist. Others said she was blackmailing him. Others mocked him as a fool. Panic clawed at her chest. She confronted him on the porch one evening, her phone thrust in his hand. Look at this. Look what they're saying about you. You need to leave. Protect yourself before they destroy you like they destroyed me. He read the words without flinching. Let them talk. You don't understand, she cried. They'll tear your life apart. Your job, your reputation, your family. You can't be tied to me. He set the phone down and met her gaze steadily. Do you think I care about strangers on the internet? Do you think their laughter defines me? She shook her head, gripping the porch railing. You'll lose everything if you stay. I can't let you. His eyes burned with quiet fire. Amara, I've already lost what mattered. My so-called friends want only my money. My family wants to control me. Strangers gossip no matter what I do. But you're real. Tears spilled from her eyes. You say that now, but when the pressure comes, you'll run too. I can't survive that again. He stepped closer, his voice fierce. I'm not Malcolm. I'm not the men who mocked you. I'm here because I choose to be. Her whole body shook, torn between pushing him away to protect him and clinging to him with everything she had. Outside, the world was sharpening its knives. Paparazzi were already circling. Headlines were multiplying. And the storm that had brought him into her life was only just beginning. It began with a single photograph. A teenager driving past the farm snapped a blurry image of Darius stepping out of his SUV with groceries in hand, Amara towering beside him at the gate. The caption read, "The giant bride has company." Within hours, it spread across social media. The memes came fast, crueler than ever. They drew cartoons of her cradling, him like a doll, of him trapped in her fist, of wedding cakes collapsing under her weight. Amara had tried to harden herself, but this time the mockery cut deeper, because now it dragged Darius into the storm. Soon his face appeared beside hers in online headlines. Mystery man seen with giant bride. Who is he? Speculation exploded. Some called him a fetishist. Others insisted she was blackmailing him. Others mocked him as a pathetic fool. Every insult she had endured alone was now aimed at him as well. Panic consumed her. One evening she confronted him on the porch, shoving her phone at his chest. Look at this. Look what they're saying about you. You need to leave. Protect yourself before it's too late. He glanced at the screen without flinching. Let them talk. You don't understand, she cried. They'll destroy you like they destroyed me. Your reputation, your career, your family, you can't be tied to me. He set the phone aside and met her eyes. Do you think I care what strangers say? Do you think their laughter defines me? She trembled with rage and fear. You will? Care when your friends laugh, when your family mocks you, when the world turns against you. He stepped closer. They already laugh at me for other things. They already use me. This is different. Her voice cracked. You don't know what it's like to be mocked by millions. His heart twisted. You don't know what it's like to be loved only for money. We both carry scars, Amara. Different scars, but the same pain. Her breath caught at the vulnerability in his voice. Loved for money. It wasn't love at all. Their gazes locked, and for the first time she saw in him not just kindness but recognition. If they knew who you really were. Her voice trailed off. He hesitated, tempted to reveal himself. But he couldn't. Not yet. Not when the fragile bond between them was just beginning. So he said quietly, Then let them not know. Not yet. She leaned back, torn between suspicion and longing. One day you'll regret this. He gave a faint smile. Then let that day come. For now, I'm here. In the silence of the farmhouse, both of them understood what it meant. The world outside would never forgive them. She was mocked for her body. He was hiding behind anonymity. Together, they were defying a society obsessed with perfection. Their bond was fragile, but it was real. But reality had sharp edges. Another picture spread online within days, this time clear. Darius at her gate smiling at her. The internet erupted. Headlines screamed, "Who is the man with the giant bride?" Within hours, paparazzi descended on her road. Trucks parked outside the farm, long camera lenses pointed at her windows. Neighbors whispered openly now. One night, Amara broke down completely. She shoved him away, sobbing. "You have to stop coming here. It's killing me to see you dragged down with me." He stared at her, jaw tight. "Do you want me to leave? Because of them? Or because of you?" Her lips trembled. She couldn't answer. "Say it," he pressed. "If you don't want me here, I'll go. But if you're only pushing me away because of them, then you're letting them win." Her knees gave out as tears streamed down her face. "They're stronger than us." "No," he said fiercely. "They're loud. That's not the same as strong." She collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. "I don't know how much more I can take." He knelt beside her, pulling her hands gently away. "Then let me carry some of it." Her heart twisted. For weeks she had fought alone, convinced her pain was hers alone to bear. Hearing him offer to share it nearly broke her. She whispered, "I'm afraid." He touched her cheek softly. "So am I. But fear means it matters." Outside, flashbulbs sparked from the road, voices jeering from beyond the gate. The storm around them was growing louder, and soon Darius's true identity, the secret he had tried to protect, was about to explode into the open. The pressure finally broke when a tabloid traced the SUV's registration and revealed his name. Within hours, every headline blared. Darius Cole, billionaire investor seen with the giant bride. The story exploded across every major outlet. Commentators debated endlessly. Was it a publicity stunt? Was she blackmailing him? Was it some strange obsession? For Amara, it was her worst nightmare. Now it wasn't just her humiliation, it was global. She begged him to deny it, to claim it was a mistake, to save himself. "Please," she cried over the phone, her voice hollow. "Say it's not true. Say you don't know me." But he refused. "I will not lie about knowing you." "They'll crucify you," she shouted. "Let them," he answered calmly. "I'm tired of living in their cage." For the first time, Amara saw the weight. He carried too, different from hers, but heavy in the same way. He was trapped by the expectations of wealth and power, just as she was trapped by ridicule and shame. Both of them had been caged by a society that decided their worth for them. Still, fear gnawed at her. One evening, as cameras flashed outside, her gate and neighbors whispered loud enough for her to hear. She broke down again. "You have to stop this," she sobbed. "Go back to your world. Leave me in mine. Don't throw your life away for me." He stood still, rain streaking his face as he whispered, "I will not leave until you make me believe you don't want me here." She collapsed to her knees, whispering through tears, "I don't know what I want." He knelt beside her, his hand hovering near hers but never forcing contact. "Then let's find out together." Those words cut through the chaos like a lifeline. She looked at him through tears, and for a moment, the noise of the world faded. But outside, the storm of scrutiny was only growing louder. Within days, Darius stood before a wall of cameras in New York. Investors were demanding answers. His family was in uproar. The headlines wouldn't stop. Amara watched from her farmhouse, trembling as he walked onto a stage for a press conference. He wore no tie, his suit plain, his face resolute. Flashbulbs exploded as he stepped to the podium. "You want to know the truth?" he said, his voice steady. "Then here it is. The woman you call the giant bride is someone I care for deeply, not because of a stunt, not because of blackmail, not because of a game. Because she is stronger, kinder, and more real than anyone I have met in years. You call her a joke, I call her extraordinary." The room erupted in chaos. Reporters shouted. Cameras clicked furiously. He lifted his hand for silence. "Yes, I am Darius Cole. Yes, I am a billionaire. But money has never bought me love, and power has never bought me peace. Amara Johnson has given me both by simply being herself. If that offends you, then so be it. I will not apologize for who I choose to love. The clip hit every screen in America within the hour. Social media exploded. Half the voices mocked him louder than ever, calling him insane. But the other half rose in support. Women who had been body-shamed, men who had been ridiculed for appearance, people who had lived under cruel judgment. For the first time, Amara wasn't mocked alone. Others were standing with her. She watched the broadcast, tears streaming down her face. She had been certain he would crumble, certain he would throw her aside to protect his empire. Instead, he had stood before the world and chosen her. That night, he drove hours back to the farm, cameras trailing him until he lost them on back roads. When he arrived, she was waiting on the porch, her eyes red from crying. "Why did you do it?" she whispered as he stepped out of the car. He walked toward her, steady and deliberate. "Because I won't let them define you, or me." They needed to hear it from my own mouth. Her hands shook as she reached for him. "They'll hate you for this." "They already do," he said, taking her hands gently. "But I'd rather be hated for the truth than loved for a lie." She broke then, leaning into him, letting herself be held. For the first time, she didn't feel grotesque or enormous. She felt human enough to be loved, small enough to be safe. He pressed his forehead against hers and whispered, "I meant every word. You are extraordinary." Her heart ached with fear, but hope bloomed anyway. The next morning, the headlines were relentless. Some mocked harder than ever, while others praised Darius's courage. Society split in two. But for Amara, the world had shifted. She was no longer just the giant bride abandoned at the altar. She was the woman a billionaire had stood beside in front of the world. For the first time since those church bells, the weight of shame began to lift, replaced by something fragile: belief. The backlash, however, came fast. Within days of Darius's declaration, his board of directors called emergency meetings. His family sent emissaries. Every financial news channel speculated about the downfall of coal enterprises. Reporters swarmed outside his Manhattan offices. Society columnists painted Amara as a grotesque interloper who threatened to topple an empire. Amara saw it all on her phone. Every headline dissecting her body, every commentator calling her a liability. The weight was unbearable. She began to withdraw again, answering Darius's calls with curt words, refusing to see him when he came back to the farm. "You need to save yourself," she whispered one night over the phone. "Cut me loose before it's too late." His reply was steel. "Never." But she hung up, convinced she was protecting him. That week, Darius faced his board in a skyscraper high above the city. Old men in suits warned of ruin, stockholders abandoning ship, reputations collapsing. His own mother sat at the head of the table, her eyes cold as she said, "If you don't end this farce, you'll destroy everything your father built." Darius rose from his seat, his hands braced on the table. "If you think I will discard the woman I love to protect numbers on a screen, then you don't know me at all." Gasps filled the room, but he walked out without looking back. That same night, a storm ripped across the plains. Amara sat alone in the farmhouse, doors locked, phone switched off. She tried to convince herself that solitude was safer, that she was protecting him by pushing him away. Lightning split the sky, thunder rattled the windows. Then came the pounding at the door. At first she thought it was the storm until she heard his voice. "Amara!" Her heart stopped. She flung open the door, rain whipping into the room. Darius stood there drenched, hair plastered to his face, his suit soaked through, eyes blazing with determination. "What are you doing here?" she shouted over the roar of the storm. "You'll ruin everything." "Everything's already ruined if I lose you," he said, stepping forward, water streaming down his face. "You can't mean that," she cried, tears mixing with the rain. "You'll regret me." He dropped to his knees in the mud, clutching her hands. The storm howled around them, but his voice cut through it steady and unshaken. "You once told me I was going to have sex with you, but what I really want is a life with you." Her breath caught. The words hit harder than the thunder. "I love you, Amara," he said, eyes burning with truth. "Not despite who you are, but because of who you are. You are stronger than any storm, stronger than their laughter, stronger than the world's cruelty. And I would rather spend one day beside you in this mud than a lifetime in their gilded cages." She collapsed to her knees in front of him, her gown soaking in the rain, sobs shaking her chest. For so long she had been mocked, abandoned, treated as less than human. Yet here was a man with everything, willing to throw it away just to stay. "You'll lose everything," she whispered, trembling as she touched his face. He kissed her hand, then let it be gone. "None of it matters without you." The storm raged, but neither moved. In that moment, the noise of the world disappeared. Only truth remained between them. "I love you too," she whispered. And as lightning lit the sky, their lips met, sealing a vow no storm could wash away. The storm passed, but its memory lingered as Amara and Darius began to rebuild, not only their lives, but the land that had once symbolized her exile. Together, they decided the farm would no longer be a place of shame, but a beacon of strength. Darius poured his money into the project, but not through distant checks or anonymous contractors. He worked beside her, sleeves rolled, boots in the dirt. They cleared fields overtaken by weeds, restored the barn to its former glory, and purchased equipment that transformed the land into a model of modern agriculture. At first, the locals whispered that it was just another vanity project, something doomed to fail. But when jobs opened and wages flowed, suspicion gave way to gratitude. Men and women who once mocked Amara now worked under her guidance. They learned that her strength wasn't monstrous, but essential. She taught them how to lift, how to endure, how to take pride in labor that fed the community. For the first time, her towering frame was not ridiculed but respected. National media tried to twist the story into scandal, but the images coming from the farm told another tale. Photographs of Amara leading teams in the fields, Darius at her side, children laughing in the background. The narrative began to shift. The giant bride was no longer a figure of ridicule. She was the giant guardian, a woman who had turned cruelty into leadership. Even so, Amara still battled doubt. Some nights she sat on the porch, staring at the horizon, wondering when the laughter would return, when the world would strip away the fragile peace she had found. But Darius always sat beside her, taking her hand, reminding her that they had already survived the worst. Slowly she began to believe. The farm flourished. They formed a cooperative with neighboring towns, building fair trade agreements that Darius structured, but Amara enforced with unyielding resolve. They refused to let greed or prejudice poison their work. Families who once sneered at her now sent their children to learn from her. Farmers sought her counsel. Newspapers printed stories not of scandal, but of resilience. The transformation was not just in the farm, but in her. Amara no longer flinched at her reflection. She no longer whispered the vow that had once been born of despair. Instead, she spoke a new promise, to live boldly, to love fiercely, to never again apologize for existing. For Darius, too, the change was profound. Away from boardrooms and flashing cameras, he found meaning in building something real, something tangible. He discovered peace in choosing love over power. His family still resisted, his board still muttered, but the undeniable success of the farm silenced them. Profits grew, and the image of him standing proudly with Amara turned him from a figure of scandal into a symbol of defiance. They had not only survived, they had thrived. When the first harvest festival arrived, the farm glowed with music and lights. Stalls overflowed with food. Laughter filled the air, and Amara walked through it all with her head high, Darius's hand in hers. The same community that had once labeled her a freak now cheered her name. She was no longer abandoned. She was chosen, not just by Darius, but by the people who had finally learned to see her worth. As night fell and lanterns lit the fields, Amara looked around at the land reborn, at the man beside her. at the faces once hostile now filled with respect. She whispered to herself, not in despair but in triumph. I have a life. I have love. And for the first time she truly believed it. The second wedding was nothing like the first. There was no ornate church, no crowd gathered to gossip, no groom trembling with shame. This time it took place on the very farm that had once been Amara's, place of exile but was now her sanctuary. The barn was draped in flowers grown from her own fields, long tables stretched under strings of warm lights, and the air carried the scent of harvest. Neighbors, workers, and friends gathered not to sneer, but to celebrate. When Amara stepped into view, her gown was simple but radiant, her head held high. Silence swept the crowd, not in judgment, but in awe. She was still tall, still broad, still unlike any bride the world expected, but she was no longer a joke. She was a woman who had endured humiliation and emerged unbroken. At the altar they had built together from reclaimed wood, Darius waited, his eyes locked only on hers. When she reached him, he took her hands firmly, his voice strong enough to carry across the fields. The first time I saw you, the world called you a spectacle, but I saw strength. The first time I heard you, the world called you a joke. But I heard truth. Today I call you my partner, my equal, my love. Tears glistened in Amara's eyes as she answered, her voice trembling but steady. Once I believed no man would want me. Once I thought I had to force someone to stay. But you showed me I was never unworthy. You showed me that love isn't about fitting into the world's small expectations, but about building a world big, enough for us both. They sealed their vows with a kiss beneath the open sky, and cheers erupted across the farm. Cameras were present again, but this time they weren't held by gawkers or gossipers. They were carried by journalists documenting a story of resilience and love that had defied ridicule. The headlines that followed no longer called her the giant bride abandoned at the altar. They called her Amara Cole, the woman who transformed mockery into triumph. As the sun dipped and lanterns glowed, Amara stood on the farmhouse porch, Darius's arm around her shoulders as guests laughed and danced below. For years she had been defined by what others thought she lacked. Now she was defined by what they had built together. She whispered softly, "No regrets." Darius kissed her hair and smiled. Only beginnings. Their story spread far beyond the farm. It reminded the world that beauty is not a measurement, and love is not a transaction. It is a choice, a defiance, a vow made in the face of laughter and doubt. And as Amara looked out across the fields, her heart full, she knew the bells of her first wedding had marked an ending, but these cheers marked the beginning.